Changing minds, changing lives. The Liaison and Diversion Diaries. A podcast run by frontline workers discussing all things criminal justice in relation to multiple and complex needs. Our Liaison and Diversion service supports people with vulnerabilities in custody, courts, prison and the community, helping to bridge the gaps for people accessing services. We are a service of the Birmingham and Solihull Mental Health Foundation Trust. Tune in for our monthly podcast, where we will feature guests from all walks of life discussing issues affecting us in the here and now.
We have a few guests in our studio today, so if you'd like to take a moment to introduce yourselves.
So my name's Neelam, I'm the Service Manager for the Liaison and Diversion team.
My name's Matt Brayshaw, Recovery Lead for the Liaison Diversion Service.
I'm Vinod Patel, I'm the Outreach Lead for the Liaison and Diversion team.
I'm Laura, I'm Liaison Diversion Practitioner.
Hello all.
Hi.
Hi!
So, what is liaison and diversion? Neelam, would you like to give a little bit of a talk about what we do?
Sure, so in a nutshell, Liaison and Diversion was set up in order to work with people going through the criminal justice system. So we have teams based in police custody, the court environments, and we have an outreach component as well. The aim of our service really is to carry out holistic assessments for people who've been arrested at a very early stage, to identify needs and to divert them away from the criminal justice system as is relevant. That might include doing court reports, it might include referrals to safeguarding, mental health teams, charities, housing, it could be absolutely anything. And we'll support them straight through to actually attending those appointments for the referrals that we've made. So the service covers quite a lot. And in terms of the professionals we have with the team, it's very varied. So today we've got mental health nurse, we've got a speech and language therapist, I'm a social worker, Matt's got a very varied background working with service users, as well as a teaching background, I believe. So
Yeah, actually. Never shows though, does it?
So that's what we do in a very nutshell, and we also have various links with partner agencies, and we work with people with lived experience, and multiple charities where we have workers based within them to support the people that we assess.
Okay. So, naturally, given the times, as we call them the times, your team will have had to go under drastic changes under COVID-19, and we just wanted to talk a bit today about what the positives and negatives have been and the different effects that you've had to encounter while working.
Yeah.
So I guess my first question would be, naturally, what have been the positives and negatives for COVID-19 and working?
I think for me, being the manager of the service, it's probably going to be very different to what some of the other people on this podcast might come out with. But I think the first and most important thing is that actually as a service, we've still continued. We've actually not shut down any part of what we do within the custody environment. We've still done the assessments. Where we've had to make provisions is when we've come to community support, and that's massively influenced by what's available, because a lot of third sector organisations, rightly so, had closed or were working from home, so that support had gone. So we'd had to adapt how we then work as a result of that. Binal can probably speak a bit more to the type of support that we have given in those situations to people in the community, really. But in relation to the custody environment, we've still functioned, we've still done assessments, we've still shared information and done the safeguarding referrals. But how we've supported people in the community, I think, has been quite different and quite unique.
So yeah, echoing from what Neelam said, I suppose we had to be really creative in the outreach part of the service to see how we could keep supporting our clients. So that did start off with a lot of telephone support, and actually we noticed quite an increase in engagement during that period, and I suppose that goes back to other services being closed or not able to offer the same support that they previously did. But on the back of that, we still did emergency visits, we still did doorstep visits where we thought it was necessary and appropriate to do so. We were still delivering food parcels to clients. We noticed a huge increase in people's need for accessing food banks, their medication, for example, if they weren't able to get to pharmacies. A lot of our clients were struggling with COVID, so the anxieties around it, not knowing what it's about. So I think what was really good about the outreach team is they also created packs to give out to clients that included what COVID symptoms were how to get help, hand washing, but also a leaflet on like hand washing techniques. So we were supporting clients in a variety of different ways to try and keep them safe, but also the staff safe.
Okay, just to touch further on that, have you seen a difference in the types of help people needed?
Yeah, so like I'd said, food banks, there was a huge increase at first when COVID first came about. So we found a lot of people asking for help because they had financial difficulties. There was also an increase in domestic violence victims that had come through custody, which then reflected into our outreach women's pathway with Anna Wim, which kind of went in line with what the government was saying, that actually with more people being indoors, there will be a spike in that, and actually a lot of women did disclose that they needed help and wanted help.
And I think some of our clients were still being evicted as well, because a lot of the agreements, license agreements that a lot of our clients are under, the accommodations they go to, they're not assured tenancies. So the whole thing around the government, quite rightly saying there's going to be a sort of freeze on a lot of the evictions, didn't apply to our clients. So we're getting certain situations where people were being evicted, they don't have the rights, and we were trying to access accommodation for people.
And we had to change the way we supported them as well, didn't we? Because previously we were able to take people in our cars, support with moving their belongings, etc. But actually this was more, I suppose, empowering them to move, but we could take their belongings or meet them at properties, introduce them to housing providers. So it was just being creative in how we help the clients.
Yeah, and I think it brought out that point that I think we do really well with our work with clients in courts, custody and outreach, which is about that they're equal partners in the solutions. And I think that's really come through at this time, definitely with the outreach work that me and Binal have seen, where actually clients have come for an absolutely key piece of information where we were, because of the times, we were getting a bit stuck, and it's been absolutely brilliant, some of that stuff.
And I think just to add on to that, one of the really unique things about liaison and diversion in Birmingham especially is our pilot that involves kind of supporting people on short-term sentences coming out of prison. In terms of that, initially we did have to put a hold on that because of outbreaks and making sure people were working in safe environments. But again, the support that they've needed actually in that time where we weren't perhaps functioning to our full capacity because people were still being released from prison, but it's just the fact that help wasn't there anymore. We have a very, very small team, and it is a small capacity that they can have of people that they're supporting. So it's actually some of them being re-diverted as well through the system and through the team. And I think that has worked really well, given the situation we were all in, that we were still able to make some links and do support over the phone or advise professionals.
Okay. I suppose one of the challenges was some of our partner agencies had to work from home. And because we all have different guidelines from our different organisations, it was trying to work together to provide the best support we could for our clients. And actually, we managed that really well. So if someone was working from home, but they had a client that needed a food parcel or, forms delivered, etc., we would go out and then do joint visits to try and support that client. So we actually communicated really well during this time and using technology like Microsoft Teams, which we previously never used.
With those weird backgrounds now that we've all figured out.
Challenging in itself, getting everyone onto Teams, but we got there in the end.
Yeah.
And I think that by the nature of working in an outreach service, it tends to be people who don't necessarily want to spend loads and loads of time in an office, do you know what I mean? So in a safe way, when there's any work involved on other colleagues' behalf who had to be at home.
We were running.
There was a very, very long, it's a very
all
long
hands
queue
up,
to
can
do.
I go? Like we were deprived of stepping outside.
Okay, and what will you take forward from these experiences going from work? Do you think you can return to normal, whatever normal was before COVID?
I think it's going to depend on how things are going to transpire, because we still don't know what's happening, especially looking at it from a police custody point of view, for example. Again, Laura might be able to to touch on this because she actually started with the team midst the pandemic. So we had to adjust her induction entirely. She had to come in and work in a team that was still figuring out how we were working. And the clients that we were seeing coming through, or service users coming through, actually were probably some of the most complex that we've ever had in the history of liaison and diversion. I don't know if you've found that
so like
to be the case.
Neelam said, I started midway through the coronavirus pandemic, and for me it was a relief because I've been furloughed for 2 months, so I was going absolutely mad, sat at home doing nothing. So to come to work was brilliant to begin with, but I think seeing how things still work, so like I said, custody, I don't know what it was like before COVID, but I can't imagine there being much difference to when COVID's over. People were still being assessed, and having the numbers, still the same amount of people coming through, and like Neelam said, a lot more complicated cases, people involved in Mental Health Act assessments and things like that have been a lot higher. And again, the court side of things, for me that was different. I've not yet actually been to the court building, but I've worked on the court team a number of times, so it's working out who I need to contact but having not actually met them. But I think the fact that we're still able to do that, and the people are still there, they're either working from home, there's still a number to call, there's an email that replies, it's been really great for me to still get to know the partner agencies and still work out who to refer to and where to go, and it's great for the clients because the opportunity's still there for them as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that will definitely change is the use of virtual things. So like Laura said about the courts, they have gone virtual at the moment. We don't know how long that's going to last, if that's going to be now a permanent fixture for the courts and trials. In police custody, yes, face-to-face assessments are still happening, but the outcome of people, we're seeing a lot more people bailed, for example. It's whether there'll be leniency in terms of how people are dealt with from a criminal justice point of view. In terms of outreach, for example, we might start now to look at actually the type of help that we're offering people. Before it was quite fixed and rigid, that you'd identify a need in custody and then that need is supported via our outreach. But now I suppose we knew an element of this before as well, but those needs change. They can change within an hour, within a day, within a week, and we need to work alongside that, but still stick to what the remit of liaison and diversion is and stay within our capacity, because then we also run the risk of having a caseload that is dangerously high and not having staff that are able to work safely because they're feeling under pressure or feeling burnt out. So I think there's all those factors that we need to take into consideration going forward. But from my point of view as a service, I think there's definitely going to be changes, and hopefully it's going to be changes for the better to help our service users really.
I mean, we've been asking clients, haven't we, part of an NHS England survey about sort of their experiences during COVID-19, but but a lot of it is talking about sort of communication preferences and stuff like that, and some people quite preferred a bit more of sort of phoning and stuff. And I know someone, Binnell, who we both worked with, did incredibly well and revealed some really important things about their lives and difficulties that we spoke about, that maybe they haven't talked to anyone before about, and that it might have been easier for them to do that over the phone. We didn't even meet that client, and they've done incredibly well with us, haven't they?
Gone back to work and everything, so I suppose it just shows that it doesn't have to be face to face, it's what support they're getting, and is it the right support they're getting, because we did everything with him over the phone, made the referrals to the appropriate services, kept in contact over the phone, and actually he's come out of this in a much better place with the right support in place for him.
And I suppose there's something about taking that forward in terms of the use of technology, is that we as a service, and perhaps other agencies, need to be really aware of people who don't have access to technology, because that's a massive gap that I'm very conscious of, that we have missed over this COVID period, because we've only been able to do what we can do. We've purchased mobile phones for people to be able to give to them, to get hold of them. We've topped up phones where we've needed to, But again, there's still limitations, because if you've got someone who's 65 on your caseload and has never used a phone before, you know, how do we get around that but safely educate them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and without mentioning any names, that's been the case for some of our that's been the case for some of our colleagues.
Oh God!
We had a three-way. We had a three-way on Zoom yesterday, and the client was on there. Do you know what I mean? He was first of all, and then when our colleague came on, it did feel like, you know, like the first transatlantic sort of telephone call, when I won't mention no names, but yeah, it all felt a bit like that.
Yeah, so it's just getting used to a new way of working, isn't it? Which it'll be exciting but challenging at the same time.
And how do you feel the team have coped with that? And generally, have you seen any major changes or any drastic changes within the team?
I think the team has coped incredibly well. And I'm not just saying that because they're all sat here.
No, I would agree.
But I think they've really risen to the challenge, actually. And what's been really nice is, given that we are still a small team compared to community mental health teams, for example, we've not had people that have kind of shied away from doing the task at hand. So if they've needed to go and support someone, they've looked at ways how they can do that safely by thinking outside of the box. You know, a case of wearing PPE, dropping food parcels off at the end of their garden, knocking on and then running away and making sure they've still got them, or, you know, seeing them through a window, or ringing pharmacies to make sure medications and prescriptions were in. So I think the team has been really adaptive and responsive, actually, to things that have been rising, especially with the government, and the guidance that they've been given hasn't always been very clear. I think the team have taken a really common sense approach, and that's something that's been commented on at various kind of board level meetings I've been at.
I think that's one thing I noticed when I joined the team, is that when I worked with outreach for the week, they sort of said to me, right, this is what we would do normally, this is the usual sort of pathway that we go through, however, this is what we're doing now, and all these adaptations that you were doing. And even then I could see somebody would come to you with a problem or a challenge getting through COVID, and you'd work out how to get around it, whether you speak to them at the end of the garden, you're just doing increased telephone calls, whatever it was. But for me that was really great to see that, although that we probably wouldn't usually do that in this circumstance, that was what's most helpful for that client, and that gave them, whether it was just a familiar face for 10 minutes on the doorstep, giving them a food parcel or whatever. But that seemed really brilliant,
And I suppose it was the gratefulness of people, because they were like, we thought we'd been forgotten about and we didn't know where to get help from. We're so grateful, thank you so much. You know, that made me feel really helpful and useful and good personally, to think that we have helped people that might have otherwise been forgotten, because there's that group of people, they don't hit that extreme high risk vulnerability during COVID, and then they're not fully functioning alone and they're stuck, aren't they?
I think there was a thing from a personal point of view where it was really great to work sort of normally or semi-normally and get out to the office every day. I've had stuff like where I've had depression, anxiety, and been stuck in the house. So actually I associate being stuck in houses. Do you know what I mean? It actually sort of brings on sort of depression and anxiety in me. But then there was a thing that was interesting for me, that I was going to work normally and then coming back and in lockdown and at weekends and stuff like that. So I was like flitting between the two that I found I found that difficult, but at the same time.
And as a team, I think that was one of the things that came up. So there were some of us that really wanted to come back to work and be in the office, and there were other staff that actually enjoyed the flexibility of working from home and working from the office. So we worked around that and we created like a rota to keep it safe, etc. But then the liaison and communication between all of us was the same. So if you're working from home but you had to do a visit, you'd just meet the other staff at the place that you were going, for example. And then I've kind of forgotten where I was going to go with that. Very unusual for that.
Literally the first time.
The way the team helped each other, I know. The way the team helped each other, actually, and it might sound really silly to some people, but was our lunch break. Actually coming together and all of us checking on each other. What do people want to eat? What shall we do today? Actually made such a difference to the team and the morale. And then we ended up with Big John Wednesdays. But yeah, you know, we'd come together at that time, and that was our time just to have a break, have some food, reflect on what we'd done, but just chill out for a bit. And actually it was so nice because the whole team appreciated that, and it was that check-in, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So what would you say has been the most significant moment for you during the whole period of COVID?
Wow.
Personally or at work?
Okay, so personally, I had symptoms of COVID and had to be at home for 2 weeks. And later on established it was COVID, but I struggled in that 2 weeks. So I tried to work from home initially, but then I became so unwell that I had to call in sick. But I couldn't not work, but then I had Neelam telling me, listen, you need to stop now. Stop messing with the stuff and just stay at home and get better. And actually when my symptoms went, I was begging to come back because I felt like my freedom had been taken away from me, which was strange because actually in lockdown our freedom was taken away from us, and it made me think about our clients and what they might go through and actually what I take for granted. So that was really big for me.
I think for me it was before starting this job. Like I said earlier, I was for 2 months at home on lockdown. I was furloughed from my old job, so I was doing nothing. And for the first week it was like holiday. It was great. I got this decorating done, I was cooking, and then it got to a point where I had no motivation to do anything because even though I had all the time in the world to cook or do whatever I wanted, wouldn't necessarily go out, but I lost that motivation completely. And like Binal said, thinking about people we work with and how that must affect them if they've not got, I knew I had a job to go back to, I knew I was still getting paid, so the relief of that for me was brilliant. But I can't think what it'd be like to not have the relief of feeling you're going to get paid or your accommodation's stable and not being able to go out, see friends or family. That must be really, really difficult. So for me, starting in this job was a saviour in that I was allowed out the house, I could speak to people, I made friends. So for me, that's probably the biggest positive and significant part of COVID.
I think for me it would be around, I suppose, my role, because when the pandemic happened and we went into lockdown, I was actually stuck abroad.
She left me.
I was, and Binal had to do all that kind of initial running around, and then for me, when I did manage to get back, it was just kind of everything was just kind of go, and no one can ever prepare you to prepare your service for a pandemic. So it was a massive eye-opener for me, especially. I think Binal did exceptionally well to handle things whilst I was getting back. But it's just you're taking each day at a time, and you've got that concern around, are my staff safe? Are the service users safe? Are we working in a safe way? If I do this, what is that going to mean for X, Y, and Z? So you're constantly thinking, and it is very hard to switch off when you're constantly have a million reports to do, risk assessments to do, buildings to risk assess, PPE to order.
And the updates were coming in daily, so you do one plan and then you have to change it the next day to meet the new requirements or guidance.
And I suppose it's a thing because we work with partner agencies, it wasn't a case of me just managing my team. It was about taking account and sitting on board of various meetings for West Midlands Police, for our partner agencies, whether it's Anna Williams Shelter, No Wrong Door, and just taking all this information to be able to run the service safely, but at the same time making sure we weren't failing our service users. I think we've come out of it okay. It could have gone a lot differently to how I think it has, but I think that's down to the staff team that we work with, and if that commitment wasn't there, I think it would have been a very different situation for me as a manager managing a service within this pandemic era.
And what was your world record for a daily Zoom Microsoft?
Do you really want to know this?
Well, go on.
I started at 8 and finished at 6, and I did 9 Zoom or virtual meetings back to back.
Wow.
So that you didn't even have to think about that. You thought about that before.
Yeah, because I just thought, I think by the end of it you're just zoomed out. But I don't have that concern of, oh God, what am I wearing? Are they going to see I'm wearing my bedclothes yet or not? I figured out how to get those filters on, so
Or the pajama bottoms on the bottom.
That's
and then
right.
A nice top.
What about you, Matt?
I think it was with family, so I had a couple of family members older family members who were quite unwell at the start of with COVID at the start of the lockdown when the pandemic arrived. So that brought it home to me, on a personal level, what was going on. And then another family member has been having cancer treatment, albeit successful, and it's all great, and have been discharged from under the care, which is fantastic. But and what's lovely about that is it's somebody who has had this magnificent experience under the NHS. Do you know what I mean? And they sort of really looked after our relative, and it makes me proud to have worked with the NHS in this time that he's so happy about it as well. So.
Aww, that's
lovely.
It is.
So I have no more questions, so we're gonna wing it. How have you detached personally? Because going to work, you really, like you said, you're in the moment and you're in the zone. So how do you step away from that and kind of come back to yourself? And
Also, that's been really hard in COVID. So for me personally, a lot of the things that we would have done outside of work, we couldn't do anymore, and I did struggle with that. So what my normal coping strategies would be, and going to see my family, nieces, friends, I couldn't do that, or going for a meal, or all of those normal things that we used to do before had to significantly change and adapt. And it was one of my colleagues that reminded me that just because we don't have our other coping strategies doesn't mean we can't find new ones. And so, I don't know, for me it was gardening, which I'd never done before, and then suddenly we had team plants growing everywhere, and we had to find a new way of bonding and a new way of coping.
that's interesting. Team plants.
Yeah, lots
What
of
did you
them.
grow?
Tomatoes, strawberries, coriander, garlic, different flowers that I don't know the names of, but everyone was just sending in pictures and exchanging all these plants that they'd grown, and actually it was quite nice because that was another way the team came together.
Yeah, people bringing in cuttings from nowhere, wasn't it? And all
Yeah.
sorts of stuff. It's great.
So what advice would you give to anyone out there who is struggling during the pandemic and is saying that they feel like they're not coping very well? What would you say to them to do?
I think the most important thing is that there is actually help out there, and they can call up, they can access these helplines. You can just Google mental health support lines and you will get the numbers that will come up for each of the specific areas if you need to. You've still got a lot of charities that are still running helplines as well. So it's a case of they can still reach out to people. We're fortunate that at the time that we're now obviously doing these recordings that we kind of, I hope, past the halfway point of this pandemic where things are now opening back up. So you can still access your GP for help. If you unfortunately find yourself in a custody environment, make them aware that you need some support so they can refer you to us, whether that's in the court environment or approach a crisis team or a mental health team. I think it's just a case of reaching out, because sometimes without speaking out, that help, you'll never become aware of it, or people can't reach out back to you. So it's a case of just really building up that courage really and asking for help.
I think that's really important because I've seen a few people in custody, and at the point of custody they're in a bit of a crisis, they need some support there. And I sort of said to them, what, have you spoken to anyone beforehand? They said, oh, well, we can't go to the GPs, I can't go to the doctors, I can't speak to them. Well, you can, there's just different ways. I think it's signposting people, making them aware that there are, whether it is your GP or a helpline, there are other ways you can get support and other ways they can reach out for
And
help.
technology has increased. They've got lots of new apps out for supporting people with mental health difficulties or just need someone to talk to. Like I know drug and alcohol services have done that as well. There's apps for that. There's apps for lots of things now. So it's just letting people know and making them more aware of what is available.
I think absolutely. I think one of the positive things from that is I think people have been a lot more free and had an emphasis on getting information around to as many people as possible. I know we've done that, and at times in the past people don't do that because I think they might think, well, if a little piece of that information is wrong, it's all going to be like that. And I think we've just made sure, like the food banks, we put out some information about the food banks, and I went home and it reappeared on my Facebook link, and I was like, oh my goodness, I hope that's right. But that was so great that it had travelled so far and wide, and I think that's been a really great thing about what's been happening recently.
Has anyone else got anything else to say before we wrap up today?
I think one of the main things is, and this will be the same for all services, I think, is that I think we are going into really different times in terms of how we operate as services, whether that's how we work within a team or the support that we offer to people. And to anyone listening who perhaps is a service user, is not to feel disheartened because of the experiences they might have had over this COVID period, where they felt not listened to or they've not been able to readily access their normal workers, and to please still continue to reach out and engage with the support that is on offer. You might feel like you've been failed from a service, but that doesn't mean another service can't step in and support you. So just continue to kind of have some faith, really, and continue to have that faith in services and ask for help as you need it.
I think Neelam said it all there.
And that's it, we're going to leave it with the boss, haven't we?
Okay, well, that seems like it's it for today, so thank you for listening, and tune in next time.
Thanks, Ali.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning into this episode. Be sure to check out our monthly podcast, and if you want to reach out, you can contact us via our Criminal Justice Liaison and Diversion Team webpage at bsmhft.nhs.uk. If you are someone who's been affected by any of the topics covered, please remember you can access help. Information for our services is listed on our website.